Hello everyone, how are we? My name's Rhiannon Morgan. Everyone calls me Rhea. If you're new around here, hi, welcome. If you are old around here, that sounds wrong, doesn't it? Returning viewer/listener, then welcome back. It's so good to have you here. Today we are doing something I love to do, which is responding to a very specific question I've had sent in. So if you've ever got a question for me, then feel free to DM me, or whenever I put up one of those question boxes on Instagram, or you can find my email on my YouTube channel or on my podcast. Drop me a little email, because I do love to share answers to very specific questions here on the channel, on the podcast, wherever you're tuning in, because I just feel it's a way that we can really that I can actually help. And I wish I'd had someone I was able to ask some of these questions that I get sent. If I was able to ask someone that had been there ahead of me, someone that's already kind of walked the path, then that would have been so helpful to me. So the question today is, I'm going to read it out for you specifically in a second, and it's all about autism, specifically autism in girls, the difference between autism in girls and boys, and why that is so challenging. But yeah, like I said, if you've ever got any questions, please feel free to send them in. I will often I'll just drop a little DM or a voice note, but I just think sometimes if you have a question, chances are so many other people are going to have questions that are similar, and if I can then jump on a live or a podcast or something and answer that for you, then obviously that may help you, hopefully, but hopefully it'll probably help so many other people as well. And sometimes we don't know what we don't know, and sometimes maybe you will ask a question and then the answer to that question will come across someone's feed, and that'll be something that ultimately changes that person's life. I know there's so many times in my life that's happened to me. So actually, by asking a question, you could be helping so many more people. So you can always also comment below. If you just put in capital letters question, then I do scan through I don't always get through to answer every single YouTube comment. I do my best, but I don't get to answer as many as I'd like. But I do scan for specific questions so that I can get to answer those. So if you are jumping on live, by the way, do say hello in the comments. It's so nice to see you guys, and chat with you live. If you're on replay, let me know, hit replay. And for now, I'm going to read you some of this question. So this is from Chrissy, who is a member of my Organised Life Club. She actually sent me this on Instagram, but she is in my Organised Life Club, and she's also said that the Organised Life Club is incredible. She joined and followed along the September planning party, and she's excited for the coming month, and she already feels more organised and calm with less racing thoughts. So that's amazing. If you want to come hang out with me inside the Organised Life Club, then all the details I'm hoping should be below. I can't remember if I put them there. But if you just go to mummyof4.com/OLC, then you can join us inside the Organised Life Club. Anyway, that is not her question. Her question is, this is from Chrissy. So she said she doesn't mind me using her name, by the way. So don't ever feel that you're going to be exposed on the internet if you send me a question, because if you ever want to send me a question and you do not wish for me to share your name, then I'm absolutely fine with doing that. I always ask if I'm allowed to share these before I do share them. So there we go. Someone's saying, don't know if it's me, but the mic sounds funny. Is that, oh dear, okay. Sounds a bit tinny. Oh, how bizarre. Okay. Hang on. Is that better? Is that better? How bizarre. Hang on. Let me just check that we're actually using. Apologies. Someone's just saying, no, apparently we are using this microphone, which should be working fine. I don't know why that is. Apologies. I normally do a little test beforehand. Yeah, is that working okay? I don't know. Someone else sound off in the comments. I'll keep going anyway. Apologies if the sound's a bit funny. Someone said in the comments the sound's a bit funny. Anyway, I don't know why I'm using my normal microphone settings. Okay, so Chrissy says, what signs did you, so she's talking about autism in her daughter. What signs did you notice you think could have been autism? Has that changed from when they were babies to now? My daughter showed strong traits, lack of socialising with other kids at all when she was younger, but is masking so much now. At school, it's hard to know if I'm just seeing things. This is so familiar. As you mentioned, girls could have struggled more as they age. Could you explain that a little bit more? Do you have any tips for parents? Must admit, I do worry about navigating social situations as my daughters grow up. Bullying, if you've experienced it, or the girls have, really hoping that's not the case. Any tips? Thanks so much. So I think that the first thing I kind of want to address is the differences in boys and girls and why girls don't get diagnosed nearly so much. Now, I feel that because we're on the internet, we have to do a gentle disclaimer here, because otherwise someone will always come for you because it's the internet and it's what they like to do. But just because we're talking about girls versus boys, it doesn't mean that some boys won't show up with autism the way that I'm describing that the girls tend to in this. I'm aware this is a generalization. It's a generalization, and in most cases this will tend to be the way that boys versus girls present. However, there are boys that kind of present in a way that traditionally girls would, and there are girls that present with autism in a way that boys traditionally would. It is all a spectrum. It is not totally gender specific, but these are the generalizations I tend to have witnessed personally, and the large majority of you that message me tend to report the same things, and the studies and things tend to report the same things. Hopefully the sound is working okay now. If someone could just let me know, because I'm feeling a bit paranoid now, if someone could just let me know that you can hear me okay, then yeah, I'd be specifically grateful, because I don't know if it's working properly now, and now that we're live, I don't know how to fix that. So anyway. Okay, so yeah, just because I'm saying boys versus girls doesn't mean that, because someone will always say, oh, my boy did that, oh my God, there are always going to be exceptions to the rule, especially with autism, which is a spectrum. So, boys often tend to, we're just going to look at some things that boys do versus girls do. And by the way, before we jump into this, if you've not yet downloaded my free guide, which if I click a button, I should be able to put on screen. If I click this button, oh, there we go. If you go to mummy4.com/100ASD, then you'll be able to download my free guide, which is 100 signs of autism. Now, these are not specific to boys or to girls. They are in no specific order. They are just designed to make you think, because I think the one thing I learned along the autism journey that I was going through with my children when they were being assessed is there are so many things that they did that I didn't even realize were anything to do with autism, because as it turns out I only have children with autism, so I've never parented neurotypical children. So some of the things that they did I thought were just kid things, and I hate to use the word normal, but that neurotypical, or things that everyone did. And I think I've clearly been brought up in a very neurospicy household, so my experience of the world and what I expect is probably shaped by that. So this guide, this 100 Signs of Autism, will really help you just think of things, and might allow you to bring up things when it comes to teacher meetings, to when you're meeting with professionals, educational psychologists and things, that they need to hear, because ultimately it's all about giving enough evidence to be able to proceed to the next level. And that seems to be how the process works. There needs to be enough evidence from the teacher to escalate it to the next level. That next level professional needs to gather enough evidence to get it onto the next level. And maybe if your child is doing something that is a typically autistic trait or behavior or sign, and you don't know about it, you won't think to mention it in those meetings, and then there won't be enough evidence to proceed to the next stage, even though they are actually autistic potentially. So that's hopefully a guide that's going to be really, really helpful for you. I know it's been helpful to lots of people. It's not a medical document. It is just something designed to make you think about what you are seeing, what you're not seeing, and to give you some points and some evidence and a way of documenting things to take to your schools or your daycare facilities or your health professionals, whatever it may be, whichever path you're going down. Anyway, let's look at some of the things, boys versus girls. And when most people think of autism, and unfortunately still when most teachers, now again, don't want to generalize, there are some teachers that are really clued up and really, really great and know exactly what they're looking for. Maybe they have autistic daughters themselves, but some teachers are still only looking for these kind of very stereotypical autism in boys traits. And unfortunately, teachers, and I can understand this, but a lot of the children with neurodiversity or additional learning needs that get picked up to have their cases escalated and to be assessed, it's because they're disruptive in the classroom. And I think what you'll see here in a lot of these examples is a lot of the more typical boy challenges are more perhaps obvious and more disruptive potentially in a classroom setting, and therefore the teacher's obviously going to be like, well, this is disrupting everyone, let's escalate this and get this child some help. Whereas the quiet good girls, in inverted commas, apologies if you're listening on the the podcast and you can't see my visuals, but you you're not going to be able to see my air quotes, are you? Then those cases aren't necessarily going to be escalated. Okay, Louise is saying that the sound is still the same, not terrible, so don't worry. Okay, thank you. When I get off this, I will have a little play around and see if I can figure out what on earth's going on. It's really bizarre because it's the same settings I use when I just film, and that's generally fine. So I don't know what's going on. The tech gods are not on my side today, so apologies if you are listening and it sounds a bit odd. Anyway, so boys versus girls. Okay, so lots of boys do some obvious, repetitive, quite overt behaviours, and we're talking rocking, hand flapping, spinning, in a very outwardly physical way. So girls, however, are more likely to still do repetitive behaviours, but they are generally a lot more subtle. So we're talking picking nails, skin picking. Zara used to be terrible at our youngest when she was younger. And I think it's one of those things, especially with skin picking, that the worse it is, the more there is to pick, and then the harder they find it to stop. Picking nails, twirling hair, and doodling, things that look, inverted commas, normal. Okay, I know we don't like to use that term because it's like typical, or it's neurotypical, or it is neurodiverse. We don't like to use that term, but unfortunately that's what teachers are looking for. They're like, just if are children doing very normal standard kid things, or are they standing out as doing things that are a lot more obvious? And those obvious things are the things that tend to be picked up, which is why historically more and more boys are assessed and so many girls are not assessed. And obviously the danger in girls not being assessed is there seems to be a high incidence of girls just not being picked up, not being assessed, and then feeling like I don't fit in, and just feeling very, very depressed. I actually feel really guilty because although our eldest obviously is a boy, he wasn't as obvious as Will. So just sort of quick brief history. If you don't know already, I have 4 children. Baby number 2 was the first one to be diagnosed. And then because I learned so much about autism through him, I noticed the signs in the girls that were so subtle that the school not only didn't notice them themselves, but thought I was overreacting and going a bit mad and just seeing autism everywhere, when I was like, no, I'm seeing these things. They're like, oh, really? Are you sure? Because I think you might be overreacting here. And they were incredibly surprised then when the girls were not just assessed but diagnosed. So it can be hugely problematic. But I tell this story because our eldest, who obviously is a boy, wasn't as obvious as our second child, our youngest baby boy, who is no longer a baby, he's taller than me. But it just goes to show that not everything is necessarily as obvious. And it wasn't until hindsight being 2020, I learned so much about it with the girls. I then looked at Dylan. I was like, oh, so a lot of the things that he was doing can be attributed to autism, because I think while raising him, was looking at him through a lens of, I grew up with sisters, I don't understand anything you're doing here, all this behaviour seems very alien to me, but I suppose this is just the men are from Mars, women are from Venus thing. I put a lot of his behaviour down to just being like, wow, I love you, but boys are weird and I don't understand you, as opposed to just noticing that perhaps it was neurodiverse behaviour. Anyway, with that being said, let's get on to the next one. So boys often show intense, very narrow interests, such as trains, Lego, flags of the world, very specific, and often very kind of little professor sort of style obsessions. Obviously, again, this is a generalization because not everyone with autism is also, incredibly high functioning and incredibly, there is the stereotype of little boys with autism being like little professors and being incredibly, very high IQ, very, very academic. And that's not the case for everybody. But boys' very specific interests seem to be more obvious than when girls have these very specific interests, because when girls become obsessed with animals or bunnies or horses or pop bands or loom bands or, very typical girly hobbies, then that's like, well, that's just what girls do. Whereas when boys become obsessed with something, sometimes, unless it's one of the more general sort of typical boy hobbies, and I think there's so much that I realize as I'm saying it, that it's so much about what we expect from children and what the sort of expectations we have for how children are going to behave, and it's how closely those children conform to those expectations or how far they drift from those expectations is how obvious someone's autism may or may not be. So perhaps if a boy is obsessed with football, then nobody would bat an eyelid, whereas if a little boy was obsessed with something a lot more specific, a lot more niche, then it might be like, oh, okay, what's going on here? It is funny, just to kind of go off on a little tangent, a little ADHD side quest here. It just makes me think about, if anyone has seen the YouTube channel, and it's an Instagram account. William actually showed it to me. He thinks it's so funny and it's just brilliant. And there's one, it's Stuff Explained by Ducks, and it's little cartoons and it's ducks explaining things, lots of things about autism and ADHD and things. And there's one, it's like Autism Explained by Ducks. And it's all sort of kind of broken English, but it's just very cute and very funny. And it's like, duck goes to pond, duck talks about snails for 42 minutes, other ducks slowly swim away. And if you haven't seen it, it's not going to make any sense to you, but please, I urge you, go and look at Diploma Duck. Will brought it to me because he thought it was so funny, and he just said to me, the bit about talking about snails for 42 minutes and the other ducks swimming away is so relatable, because he identifies that he has very niche interests. And anyway, I just thought it was really interesting that he brought that to me. And I think this can kind of speak to when you understand yourself and when you have this awareness of how your brain works, you can just be a lot more kind to yourself. You can kind of giggle at things like that rather than get stressed out about why your brain seems to work in a way that other people's, do not. But yeah, so girls' interests and boys' interests, it's more about what we expect them to be interested in. And if you look at it, if your kids have got very, very specific interests and they become obsessed, it may be an indicator. And any one of these things on their own, by the way, is not saying, if your child just has very specific interests, it doesn't necessarily mean they have autism. Just as if they do not have very specific interests, that also doesn't mean they don't have autism. Not one single element of anything I'm saying obviously can be any form of diagnosis. I'm not a doctor, just a man that's, in the trenches. And likewise, those 100 signs, the more of those that you see or you do not see, that's not an indicator of yes, autism, or no, it's not. I think the whole purpose of everything I try and share on this channel and generally is just to raise awareness, so we know what to look out for, so that we can think, okay, maybe that is a concern I should raise, or maybe we know that it's not a concern that we need to raise at the moment. But if we are equipped with this information as parents, the more we know, the more we're able to bring up. Because I think the things I beat myself up for most during the process are when I come out of meetings and be like, it's just, I should have said this, I should have said that. Or when I learned more about autism down the line, I realised there's so much more I could have said about what my children were doing at the time, because so many things that my children were doing I had no idea were those signs, which is why hopefully that guide mummy4.com/100ASD will help you. Okay, so I don't know if I'm saying this right. Sorry, I'm no good for a YouTuber. I'm no good at actually pronouncing screen names. Hello, Olivia. My daughter is undergoing a late autism assessment at the age of 12. Don't beat yourself up. That is, it's older than, obviously the younger we can get them diagnosed, the better. But 12 is so much better than, so many people get to adulthood and are still completely undiagnosed and still don't have that understanding. So 12 is still giving your daughter, it's older than 3, but it's still, while she's at home, it's still giving her that understanding of herself before she gets to be an adult, before she's, fully formed, fully grown. So I don't think we should ever beat ourselves up. And I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to you right now. I don't think we should ever beat ourselves up for things happening later because shoulda, woulda, coulda, Like, I've spent so much time beating myself up for not getting Dylan assessed sooner, because I beat myself up for the way I parented him, because I didn't understand him properly. I beat myself up for what I didn't know, but you don't know what you don't know, and you can't go back in time and change that. And beating yourself up today for that, not that I'm saying you are beating yourself up, but just, I know a lot of people do, and I have done. And I feel that when we are beating ourselves up, we're not being productive in the moment. And what you don't know, but when you do know, then you can take action. So I'd say, well done, because trying to get any girl who isn't really, let's just say, obvious or problematic in school assessed, I feel is like swimming uphill. It's just a huge struggle. So well done for getting her, getting her on the pathway. She says girls definitely mask symptoms better, I think. And I think that's sort of, if we go through the rest of the points I've laid out to talk to you about, that is what the general consensus is, and that seems to be the problem. And they seem to be girls seem to mask more in public, which obviously then makes us as parents seem a bit loop-de-loo, because we're like, we see all these signs and the teacher's like, well, I really don't, she's such a good girl. And how then we're able to document and share that information is so difficult, which is why I say write everything down. If you are inside of my Organised Life Club, make sure you download the Autism Journey Journal. You can grab it as a standalone printable inside of my store, but honestly, I think it's like the same price as just a month's membership, so you may as well just join the Organised Life Club and grab it, and you've got all the other stuff in there as well. But if you just want it as a one-off, it's inside of my store. I think it's linked below, and that is the Autism Journey Journal, and that takes you through all of the process, and it takes you through step by step everything you need to record, because taking down all of the information, it's like ammunition to go into those places. Because if you watch the vlogs where I talked about Zara's autism journey, and maybe I should chat about these things again, actually, about my girls specifically and their specific journeys that I went through with them, because they were so challenging. And with Zara specifically, they were like, no, we're not taking this any further. And that was coming from a doctor who just, quite frankly, hadn't done a job properly, because wasn't actually looking at the information. But that's another story for another day. But if you're not equipped, if you're not armed with that information, especially when you put on the spot and you feel really awkward, because it's like, oh, you know that they think that you're a neurotic parent. You have this theory, at least I did, this fear in your head that you're like, oh gosh, well, they must think that I've been consulting Dr. Google, and that, oh gosh, I know better than them. But actually, you do know your child, and you need to be able to advocate for them. So you can't be put off by that. And it's so easy to be put on the spot by medical health professionals who ultimately have got a massive caseload, and they're trying to whittle down to see the ones that they really need to see. I get it. But writing everything down is so essential, which is why I've got that Autism Journey Journal, which takes you right through that. So grab that. That's inside the Organised Life Club, or link below inside my store if you have not printed that out yet, so you can go through it. I think we're also going to be doing a workshop to take you through that inside the Organised Life Club, coming up very soon. Okay, so next one. More meltdowns at school when overwhelmed tend to be more obvious for boys. So boys, as a rule, tend to, if they need to have a meltdown, just do it. They don't tend to hold back as much. Girls, however, tend to stuff it all in and have this outward persona of being a good girl, and they tend to just mask so well in school. And then it's like I found with my girls, it's like a fizzy drink, and you've got the top on it, and in school it's just been, every time something's happened, the drink's been shaken again, and something else happens and someone else has shaken it, and it's just all building up. And as soon as you get home and the lid comes off, the tiniest thing just sends them over the edge. And it's not about, so when my girls melt down at home after school, it's generally not the tiny thing in isolation that's making them melt down, because those tiny things are not things worth melting down over. But those 10 things at home that they tend to melt down over are just the straw that breaks the camel's back, because of all the build up in school, all of the stuffing it in. Zara, for example, at home, this is a really good example of masking. Now, Zara is, I would like to say Zara's ADHD as opposed to straightforward autism. She's been diagnosed with autism after a huge battle. But now, since I've been diagnosed with ADHD myself and all I've learned about it, I look at Zara and I'm like, your textbook, absolute textbook ADHD. They do not see it in school. Now, I'm going to have to video Zara at home. She won't mind me doing it, and I will ask her permission. But she calls it Zebedee Boing. So Zebedee, I think, was a character from before my time. I'm guessing like the Magic Roundabout. And my husband talks about it. I think he used to watch it. I'm too young for the Magic Roundabout. I would like it known. But apparently there was a character in there called Zebedee, and that character was very bouncy. So Zara, Zebedee. So my husband especially sort of calls her Zebedee Boing, as in because she goes Zebedee Boinging around the place. And she literally is like, if you've ever played Sonic the Hedgehog and he does that like power up thing where he just bounces off all the walls, that's Zara. She's like ding, 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 ding. And she's like upside down the furniture. She's everywhere. She doesn't do that in school. She stuffs it all in because she's like, it's the rules, and she's just shoving it all in. And again, that shoving it in is just like build up, and then it just comes bursting out at home. So this ability to mask, I guess, helps girls fit in and appear, quote unquote, normal in school, but then the teachers aren't seeing that challenge. They're not seeing how hard they're working to stuff it in. Now, that is a bit of a generalization, because there have been some teachers that have taught my girls that have been so in tune with them and have managed to just see from their facial expressions when their faces just go a bit firmer that they're struggling. And those teachers are just angels. And the fact that they've had that understanding, they've been able to then intercept when they can see that the child wants to melt down and actually they're struggling and they're stuffing it in, and they can intercept at that point and help them through whatever they're struggling. It means the meltdowns at home, just as a fraction of them, because that is being noted in school. But I also acknowledge how hard it must be if you've got 30 kids and you don't really understand much about this stuff, to be able to notice a change in the way a child is holding their face is not going to be nearly as obvious as a little boy who's literally lying on the floor crying. Now, not to say that girls never have meltdowns in school or boys never mask, but if we're to generalise, then that's what tends to happen. There we go. So the lady that said her 12-year-old is being assessed, she says, thank you so much. I definitely do beat myself up like you. I'm a mum of 4. She's my youngest, so I thought I'd be able to spot it. But to me, her quirks were just what makes her her. I mean, and that's the thing. Xanthi says I was diagnosed at 19, but unofficially at 2. See, that's the other thing. So sometimes people are things are noticed when children are a lot younger, and the official diagnosis isn't until you're a lot older. Out of curiosity, Xanthi, if I'm saying that correctly, do you feel that having your diagnosis at 19 helped you? Do you think, what sort of impact did that have on you? It's really interesting to always hear from people who actually have their own diagnoses slightly later on when they can remember it happening. I have got a rather extended chat with my eldest, Dylan, which you can find here on the channel or on the podcast if you're listening, about his experience with going through that assessment, which was, if you listen to that, an incredibly challenging time for everybody, because he was in that the awkward stage of the teens. I think everyone reaches the awkward teenage stage at different ages, and he was in it at that stage, and it was incredibly challenging. But I think if you have got a teen about to go through that, or if you are a teen going through that, I think you'll find Dylan's words very comforting, because I know I did, just having that conversation with him. I think I got to apologise to him for everything I wanted to say about how I felt I'd failed him and not done it sooner, and he was very forgiving and very like, you did what you did, and it was best at the time, and he's very grateful for it. So hopefully that that conversation will help you if that's something you're kind of going through. Okay, so other things. Little boys often tend to do limited eye contact and are socially withdrawn, whereas little girls with autism often force eye contact a little bit more, don't appear as challenged when it comes to social interaction. They often imitate their peers more. And in fact, what I find with one of my daughters especially, it's like she's gone the other way, and she's extra in tune with people's feelings and emotions, almost as like it doesn't come naturally, so she has to work hard at it, but then she works a bit too hard at it, and she ends up being so in tune with everyone's emotions that I'm worried about what a people pleaser she is. So, with girls it can almost go the other way, which obviously is not necessarily a typical sign of autism, which is probably why when I had my concerns about her, the teachers in school thought I was literally bonkers, and I was friends with a lot of them, and were quite open with me. They're like, we really think you're seeing things here. I think you just, you're so immersed in autism, you're seeing it everywhere. And I'm so glad I followed my gut, because if I hadn't, then I wouldn't have found out that actually her struggles when they were scored were higher than William's at the time. And when he was assessed, his challenges were so much more obvious. So much more than they are now. You probably wouldn't even know if you met Will now, or you just wouldn't find it obvious. Again, absolute poster child for early intervention. The earlier the better. But at the time when he was assessed, he was what I would now call, with hindsight, incredibly obvious. Bella was not. And yet when they really dug into it, and the assessment is so detailed that they pick up things that your average person would never spot, Bella's challenges scored higher, as in she had more challenges than Will, even though he's been more obvious. So boys often, something that people notice is that they have difficulty making friends, whereas girls tend to mask and overcompensate, to work very, very hard to be included. Perhaps they are still having challenges, as in they're hovering in friendship groups. But then I think so many neurotypical girls have difficulties and struggles in friendship groups, that struggles with friendship groups in girls are not flagged as weird, because, and one thing I have noticed, bear in mind all my kids have autism, the boy friendship groups have not been nearly so dramatic, nearly so troublesome as the girl drama. The girl, shout out in the comments if you've got girls, is the girl drama, and it starts so young. I remember when Will was in year one of the parents came in and talked to the teacher and saying, worried about this, that, and the other, the girl drama. And he said, I hate to break it to you. I know you've had boys before and you've sailed through it, but the girl drama starts as young as year one sometimes. And she was like, oh my God, really? And the girl drama does start so much younger. So it's just not flagged. If a girl is having friendship struggles, no one sees that as weird, because so many girls seem to go through this, because boys just seem to brush everything off and be like, yeah, arguing today, fine tomorrow, it's all fine. And they seem to generally, the group, be so much more chilled at school age. Whereas the girls, the neurotypical girls, the neurospicy girls, or neurosparkly is the term I now used to love. I'm loving to use. They do all seem to have so much more drama. I'm just going to have a quick swig of my drink before we keep going. I'm apologising, by the way. Hopefully the audio on this is okay. I really don't know why it's sounding a bit weird. So to those of you that have let me know, thank you. But I don't know what's going on. Okay, let's go to a couple of the comments. Okay, Elle New says, I never know if these are names or if they're just screen names and how to pronounce them, so apologies. I'm 20 and currently waiting for a doctor's appointment to hopefully be referred for an autism assessment. I've always felt like I don't fit in and especially struggle at secondary school. Well, big hugs to you, because that is incredibly challenging. I'm hoping that getting this assessment will get you some of the clarity you need. I know it made such a difference to Dylan, who is now 21, and the self-awareness that the assessment and that diagnosis has given him is huge. And I actually feel that about my ADHD assessment. I feel like I'm so much kinder to myself about certain things, so much more makes sense. And Xanthi says, it helped me understand what went on in secondary school. So Xanthi was the one that was unofficially diagnosed at 2 and not diagnosed till 19. It's always such a shame that we can't have understanding younger so that we can help people, through challenges as they arise. And that is my hope. And this is why I was so keen to push my kids to get assessed, because I just needed to know, look, is this a challenge they have? Is this not? Is it in my head? Is it not? I can't tell you that. Only an assessment can tell me that. And that's the truth of it. And if you have got concerns, I would always say, write them down, gather your evidence, push for that assessment, because it's never something you're going to regret doing, I don't think. I mean, unless you live in a country where the only way to get it is to remortgage your house and it's so ridiculously expensive it's going to put you in financial strain, and obviously then that's a different thing to consider. But this country, let's not get into how long the waiting lists are and things, but getting your child's name on the waiting list is never something you're going to regret doing. And if you are dithering, should I not, just know that putting your child's name on the waiting list is not making the decision now, because the waiting list is, chances are, 3 years long. So you don't even have to make that decision until 3 years' time, by which time you'll have more data that will either be like, well, that came to something and nothing, that was all in my head, or thank goodness I put their name down. So if you're in two minds, I always say, just do it. Stop dithering, get the name on the waiting list, and do your dithering while you're already on the waiting list. That's just seems to be the better way, because I think people that wait around and think, shouldn't I, always like, oh, why didn't I do it sooner? That seems to be the reports that I get. Okay, difficulty in sensory sensitivities. Why can't I speak? Sensory sensitivities are often shown outwardly, covering ears, refusing food, things like that. Girls, they often are a little more subtle, maybe just complaining about a label, maybe just brushed off as being fussy, and just dismissed as like personality traits. With boys, it's often more sort of rule breaking or disruptive behaviour, whereas girls tend to be a lot more like rule following, teacher's pet, very good girl. And because of the masking and the pushing the difficulties internally, they're just seen as shy, quiet, withdrawn, and a good girl. It's like behaviour that is praised, which obviously then they end up doing more because it's praised. And then this just pushes the gap wider and wider between the little boys who are struggling and just letting it all out, and the little girls who are struggling and pushing it all in, and therefore they don't get any help, and that's just so sad. So early referrals from teachers tend to be for little boys who show this more obvious, these more obvious symptoms. And then the teachers are just saying to the girls, shy and quiet. And therefore, boys often get diagnosed younger with a delay in the diagnosis for girls, which obviously is going to impact their mental health, because they're like, I feel different. Why do I feel different? Why can't I fit in? And all these questions just really impact their mental health. So for me, just going back to the original question, Will seemed very quote unquote obvious. He didn't want to wear his shoes indoors. He had no desire to make eye contact. He had no desire to communicate with anyone other than me, really. And looking back, it was more like me anticipating his needs and giving him what he needed, rather than him effectively communicating with me. And I can see that now. Whereas my girls were Will was very advanced in that he was reading before he could really be bothered to talk to other people. So at 3, he could read quite fluently, but yet was not really interested in holding a conversation. So that was very spiky development, which is something that they look for, where they're not the same level across the board. So they're not struggling across the board in every area, or they're not advanced in every area. They're very advanced in some areas and not in other areas. And that spiky development can be an indication. Whereas with the girls, they were more across the board, so they were very chatty and very advanced speech, and they were utilising that a lot more. And their challenges, one thing I will say to you is the challenges that I was facing back then are like a distant memory and new ones replace them. So it gets a little bit new level, new devil. And I think when you're stuck in a cycle, like I can remember when Will was very small, he went through a phase where he wouldn't eat anything unless I counted to 20 first. I cannot remember for the life of me how we got into that rut, but we did. And that's what I had to do. I had to count to 20 or he wouldn't eat anything. And I still don't know how we got into it, and I can't quite remember how it stopped. I just know that now he will eat with no counting involved. And this was a very long time ago and he was very small. There used to be a very specific bedtime routine that Bella had to do when she was little before she got assessed. Very specific things that she had to say to me and I had to say to her, and this whole ritual that became developed. And obviously we don't do that anymore. That's all long gone. But these very specific things need to kind of be written down and jotted down because, I mean, if I go back through my notes, I'll see them, but my memory can't remember them and yours shouldn't be expected to either. So if you are going through these, through these assessments and things, then it's really important to just write everything down. You can just use a notebook, you can use a note in your phone, but the autism assessment journey journal will take you through the kinds of things you need to be jotting down. So Lindsay says, what are your thoughts on the SEN system, EHCP potentially being taken away? I mean, this is a sort of a very detailed conversation for another day, because let's face it, we could talk about all this until the cows come home. But the appalling way that both adults and children are being treated when it comes to autism, ADHD, or sort of neurodiversity assessments in this country it's just appalling. Obviously, I understand that as more information is available and more people like me are sharing this information, then more people are going to recognize the signs in their children and more people are going to access help, and then the system's overloaded. I get that. And I get that from that point of view, I'm contributing to the problem in that we're overloading the system. But I refuse to see it like that, because every individual child deserves the help that they deserve, and every parent deserves the information and the help that they deserve. And I wish that I'd had more information sooner so I could have helped my children sooner. So the answer isn't to smush down the information so less children are, we're less aware of the children that need help. The answer is to provide a system and society where children are able to flourish and people can access the help that they need, people can understand themselves, so that we can improve mental health and overall health. Because ultimately, if we don't deal with these problems now, they'll manifest as different problems in the future, and they'll become a burden, in inverted commas again, on different areas of the health system or society, because there's going to be more people that are depressed or out of work because as adults they can't find jobs because they haven't understood themselves, and then they weren't able to function properly in school, and then they weren't able to flourish, and then they weren't, there are further reaching society issues that will occur if we don't help the children and the parents and the families that need the help now, because ultimately it's the whole family that can be impacted. When a child is struggling, that's going to mean the parents struggle and the siblings struggle and everyone struggles, and ultimately it's more burden on the school, because yes, if a teacher identifies a child, then there's another child that they have to write reports for and put forward, and it's more of a strain on the system because there's someone else on the waiting list. But I would argue that there's going to be more of a problem if children are going undiagnosed, because that way it's back to just like the story my husband tells about when he was in school and he was just told he was naughty, and then he didn't do well in school and didn't get his exams, and then you just end up in that situation, So I could rant about that all day. More needs to be done. I don't know where they're going to magic the money from to do that, but I know that if the problem isn't dealt with now, then that's just shoving it down, and the problems will pop up in the future in different areas. And I think this needs to be more about prevention and giving people the help and support they need now, rather than curing the issues down the line of the mental health or the problems that these children are going to grow up to have when they're older if they don't have the proper support. So I don't know what the answer is. I don't know where the money comes from, but I know that any kind of negative changes, any withdrawal of funding or support for these children is just going to be detrimental to those children and those families. So that's I don't know what anyone else's thoughts are on that, but I personally just honestly believe that the more information, the more early intervention that we can have, the more we can support each other, the more understanding we can be of our own brains, and the more understanding we can be of our children's brains, and the more understanding, if you're a teacher, you can be of the minds of your class, then the better able you are to support them. And it's just, if you just take autism out of it, you just think of the basics of understanding, am I the kind of person that learns by reading things, or by listening to things, or by doing things? And if you can understand that basic how I learn, then the methods in which you take in information are going to be changed, and then the learning you're going to do is different, isn't it? And the success you're going to have from studying or whatever is going to be different. So if you can just think that something as basic as that, the massive impact that could have in your life, imagine just understanding, am I neurotypical or am I neurospicy? Do I have ADHD? Do I have autism? And therefore, how does my brain work? And the way I kind of like to think of it with my children is, and the way I talk to them about it is, everyone has their own difficulties, everyone has their own challenges, everyone has things they're good at, and everyone has things they struggle with. And when you understand, I'm great at these things, I struggle with these things, you can put yourself in more situations where you're going to thrive. So our eldest knows he gets spun out in crowded places. So I met him in town one day, and I had to go into Primark, and he's like, I'm going to stay with you for like 2 minutes and I'm going to go, because then I know I don't cook well in here because it spins me out. So I'm going to go and do something else and meet you afterwards. And he just has that awareness. And it's just knowing, am I, which way does my brain work? Am I a UK plug? Am I a European plug? Or am I an American plug? And they all do the same. They all, your brain runs your body, but the plug moves electricity from one place to another. But they work in different ways, and if you're trying to shove it into a plug socket that doesn't fit, then it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Everything's not going to flow, and things aren't going to be so easy. So if we can try and understand a little bit more some of these signs, so stop being like, oh, well, she's just a dreamer, she's just, off her own little world, and start thinking, okay, well, is there something more going on here? And obviously you can have a shy, quiet child that doesn't have autism or ADHD, but if they're coupled with any of the other signs, if they're having these big meltdowns at home, they need to be recorded. And I don't necessarily mean filmed. I'm not suggesting you film your children having meltdowns, because obviously that's not cool. It's not pleasant for the child to have to be filmed when they're having a meltdown. But if you can note down in your notes what's happening, if you can record as much as possible and just gather that evidence, and then you can just know for your own brain, when you have those days you're like, am I going mad? Is this all in my head? You can read over it and be like, oh, okay, maybe there's not that much evidence there, or actually there's plenty of evidence. I'm doing the right thing to pursue it here. So do not forget, by the way, guys, to download my printable, which I can put back on screen now. Where is it? It's mummyoffour.com/100ASD. I am in the process on the back end of doing a lot of moving things around. I'm moving to like different softwares and things. And like building new landing pages and things, so when you go to download the printables, it's going to be easier to get them. I'm moving my communities to a new platform. Do not panic if you're already in my Organised Life Club or my Magical Adventures Club and you're quite happy with the platform we're currently using. It's not going anywhere. I will post everything there too. But if you will be interested in moving to the new place, it's very exciting. It's going to be so much more user friendly. We're going to be able to run like live challenges and things. It's going to be easier to download the printables, easier to work through when I'm doing workshops and things. It's going to be more like in a module, easy to work through it kind of format. I'm so excited for it. It is creating a bonkers amount of work for me behind the scenes. I've had a bit of a challenging time just personally, which is why I've not been on Instagram stories or anything much recently. So it's been a bit challenging anyway, and I've thrown this on top of it, but it's going to be so good when it's done. So I'm so excited to share all of that with you. So I can't wait to update you on all that as that goes live. Lindsay says, by the way, I totally agree. If my son didn't have his EHCP, it would make such an impact on his education. Yeah, so it's a bit terrifying whenever they threaten to take away any of the things that our children rely on. And I just saw this reel. I wish I'd saved it. I would share it with you guys. And it was about it was like sort of satire, and it was like, imagine physical disabilities were treated like invisible ones. And it was a teacher phoning home going, yeah, and just we're so glad that the glasses that your child is using are helping them flourish in school. But now that they're working, now that your child's happy, I think we're going to try and wean them off the glasses because, it's working. So therefore we don't want them to lean too heavily on them. And that seems to be the way that provisions for children with additional needs are looked at. It's like, oh, they're doing okay now, so we can wean it off. It's like, well, surely if they're doing okay, it's because of it. Anyway, that's another side rant for another day. Thanks so much for joining me. When I get off this, I'll put another video on screen for you to watch next. Don't forget to download the printable. If you're listening on the podcast, rate, review, subscribe. Head over to YouTube to join the chat. I'll see you guys soon.